Hey everyone, Edmund and I were just having an interesting conversation off camera, so we thought we'd put it on camera. Ed, you're looking at property portals all the time, right? Do you actually have a favourite?
I'd say, yeah, maybe Scout 24.
Scout24, market leader in Germany, right? What makes Scout24 your favourite portal out of all 900 of them?
Well, there's a lot of different things. It's a very innovative company. They've got some cool things going on. But if you had to really put me on the spot, I'd say it's their listings.
Why are their listings so good?
Their listings are so good because they work with our sponsor, PropTex. That's PropTex with two X's. If you need to know what I'm talking about, either go to PropTex with two X's.com or you can just have a look at Scout24's listings. They're great.
Right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Ed's favourite portal is scout24.com because of our sponsor, PropTex. Right, we've got a news roundup for you. Looking forward to it. Let's get on with the show.
Hello and welcome to the PPW pod, bringing you news, views, and interviews from the world of real estate marketplaces and PropTech. I'm here for a news roundup with Harvey and Simon. How are you doing, guys?
Great to be back, Ed. Thanks for having us.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Still recovering from Bangkok, but yeah, doing pretty well.
Cool. So as I said, this is a news roundup, which we do periodically. We'll kick straight off with what I think is probably the most interesting news that we've covered over the last couple of weeks. Immobiliare.it, by the way, the .it bit is important. They stressed that to me in an email. Immobiliare.it has entered the Spanish market with the 22.5 million euro acquisition of Pisos.com. Harvey, why don't you fill us in? Who are these players and what does this all mean?
Yeah, of course. Immobiliare.it, obviously traditional Italian portal, and it's been pretty much near the top for the last 10 years. But interestingly, Idealista from Spain came along and has been ruffling some feathers in Italy last few years. I think it was about 2020 they expanded to Italy. Can't remember off the top of my head. Uh, but the point is, Immobiliare has now decided that they are going to enter the Spanish market and play Idealista at their own game, but they're doing it in a slightly different way by buying out the number four portal in Spain, Pisos.com. Number three. Okay. Ed's giving me the fingers to make sure. Yeah. So Pisos.com, number three player in Spain, is now going to be under Italian ownership, and Idealista has a new enemy on the block.
Yeah, this makes the Spanish market very competitive, doesn't it, Simon? Because we've got three
Yeah, yeah,
players now.
yeah. A bit of a color to all of this. Well, yeah, we should look at both the Italian and Spanish markets at the same time because they are connected. So I think you're pretty right, Harvey, with your background there. In that Idealista market leader in Spain for ever and a day. Immobiliare was it used to be Casa in Italy, and then uh, Immobiliare overtook them back in 2013, 2014 in Italy to become the market leader there. Uh, Lister went into Italy about a bit earlier than 2020 because they had their own side there. Then they bought up Casa along the way. So they are sort of neck to neck fighting it out in that market with Wikicars and number three, but a bit of a distant number three in that market. Now, Immobiliare, so then you go to the Spanish market, right? Then you have Idealista, followed by Fotocasa, probably Pisos, Indomio, and so on. Okay. Now, the important reason to bring up Indomio is that it's actually owned by Immobiliare. So this is not their first foray into the Spanish market. Okay. So they already had a beachhead. Okay. Now they're expanding the beachhead by acquiring Pisos to get a bigger market share. Okay. So it's going to be very interesting what happens here. Well, there in the market because you're there and I'm not at the moment. And I do think that the gloves are off and it's sort of, okay, you're in Italy. You're in Italy fighting us. Well, we're going to be in Spain fighting you. Now the question is, what does this mean for Fotocasa? Okay, the number two player, owned by Adevinta. Recently, we interviewed Tony Blamey a couple of weeks ago around this, and clearly they are on the up for sale, because as Adevinta is selling off all the assets progressively over time, I'd expect that Immobiliare might have a hard run at trying to buy Fotocasa at some point in time. I think I'd watch that space. Not this year, maybe next year or the year after. We could see something emerge.
Yeah, we've actually got an interview with the CEO of Immobiliare.it in the works. We can't publish it yet. We haven't seen his answers yet, but some of these questions I have put to him in this interview, and we'll see how he responds. Okay, we'll move on. The other kind of really big news in the industry over the last 10 days or so was that Rocket, a very big US mortgage company, is buying the brokerage Redfin for 1.75 billion. Now, this is interesting for a few reasons. You'll notice I haven't actually said the word portal in any of that because, well, although Redfin is a brokerage, it's also kind of a de facto portal. Harvey, have you got any more details on this? 1.75 billion is a lot of money, so we should definitely talk about this, right? Even though we're not really talking about a portal here.
It's interesting you should mention Portal because off the top, we have to say that Rocket, historically a mortgage providing company, actually launched a portal at the start of this year. So they have very recently diversified into having a portal. And obviously it begs the question, why is a mortgage provider launching a portal? Well, it turns out now it does make a bit more sense because they're actually trying to buy a brokerage as well. So what we are looking at here is basically the biggest mortgage provider in the States with the biggest brokerage in the States combining into one business. And one person said to me, I can't remember who, but it was something along the lines of Zillow wishes they were Rocketfin or something along those lines, where this is actually what Zillow has wanted to be the entire time. Still a loss-making venture, blah, 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 blah. But Rocketfin, if that's what we want to call it, a bit like REA Move last year, we tried to coin that name. We can coin Rocketfin now, and it seems like there's going to be a new big player on the block in the US. Simon, I saw you nodding a couple of times there, so I guess I'll hand over to you there.
So we need to think about, clearly the US market is very different from other markets. It has the MLS structure, and that if you're running a property portal in that market, whether you're realtor.com, homes.com, Zillow, etc., it's very hard to compete on listings, which is what you do in the rest of the world, right? How many listings have I got versus you? I've got higher quality, more agents using me, because that's pay to list. In the US, of course, the listings are fundamentally ubiquitous. So you've then got to think about, how do I compete on something different, right? User experience is certainly one dimension. And another dimension is, how do I then tie everything together? How do I tie lead generation at the top, which is what Redfin's been doing, with its building its brand and driving leads directly. Then they've got their network of salespeople, so they're making commission on the way through. And clearly, what's linking is important in a transaction is financing. So it makes a lot of sense to then how do you link the finance side with the portal side? Okay, to then have the transaction and the financing. And we've seen this in some other markets as well, where you've had large portals have focused on the finance side rather than as much on the transaction side. So I think overall it's a smart move. It makes sense. The stream of opportunity that will come Rocket's way should be enormous out of this. I don't know the numbers of volume of transactions per year that Redfin does, but it will not be small in this process. So
Yeah, I
let's
think
see what happens.
from what I've read on this, it seems like what Rocket are trying to do is really get into the. So Rocket traditionally are very big in the remortgaging market. So if you want to remortgage your house for whatever reason, they were kind of the biggest player there. They're not so big on the purchase mortgage front, apparently. And this is kind of a play to get them some market share in that side of the business. What's interesting, I think, about this is kind of what Zillow's talking about with their super app, right? This is kind of the same thing. This is a one-stop shop for everything. Now, Zillow's super app strategy, which they announced in, I think, when they stopped iBuying in 2021, was all very organic. It was, we're going to build the super app. We are going to, this is going to be a ground up thing. It looks like what's happening here, Rocket are buying their way to a super app. Maybe they'll, who knows, maybe they'll buy some other portal and get more traffic, because what they're still lacking here against Zillow is real top of the funnel traffic. Redfin's like a number 4 player or something. Yeah, it should be interesting to see. And we've actually got a very special good guest lined up to come on and talk about this over the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. We'll move on. Staying kind of in the United States, the next big piece of news on the docket, which again mentions the word billion. Apparently, CoStar needs to up its bid to 1.7 billion to buy domain in Australia, right, Harvey?
Yeah, so Nine basically, so Nine's investment bankers, Nine owns Domain. Nine has come back and basically said to CoStar, if you want to buy us, you're going to have to pay up, basically. So it looks like a revised price of $4.65 AUD, that's Australian dollars per share, 49% premium on Domain's trading prices as of February 20th. The new valuation would price Domain at 94 billion AUD, which is 1.8 billion, which, as you say, it's an extra 100
Okay,
billion
what's the
or
background
100
here?
million on
When did this all kick off? Who is Nine? Why are we so invested in what they're going to do with Domain? And I mean, when might this all happen?
It's an interesting question. Simon, do you want to take the lead on this one, or
Yeah. Given Domain was
go on
my
then?
arch nemesis for a while when I was at REA, so I have a pretty good idea. So if you go back in history, Domain used to be a subsidiary of Fairfax, which was the large print publication in Australia. It then got sort of rolled out. So what happened was, I'll probably get the exact ordering wrong. I think Nine bought out Fairfax and all its publications, Nine being a large media company, TVs, Channel 9 at the end of the day. And then, of course, Domain was listed as a separate entity on the stock exchange, with Nine owning about 50% of the business and the rest floating. No different to REA, where News Corp owns about 62 or so percent of it on the Australian Stock Exchange as well. Now, if you then go back to sort of COVID times and you sort of start to track who's performed well and who's not performed well since then, what you see is that REA has outperformed as a share price from that point versus Domain. Which and what happened was that Domain sort of lost its way a little bit. It ended up buying a lot of businesses. In an attempt to really enhance its offering. So doing stuff in mortgages, doing stuff in CRMs, doing stuff in a whole range of areas. This sort of strategy didn't really work out. And I think in the meantime, what happens is it took its eye off the core business, and REA sort of started to get market share in the areas or the suburbs that Domain traditionally had been strong. So that's sort of what's happening. And that's why when you look at the share price of Domain versus the share price of REA over an extended period of time, Domain underperformed. That made it very ripe as a takeover target. And that's what you had here. CoStar, who's a very, very smart, very aggressive player, has targeted Domain as a company to go after. I mean, I did put it to Andy Florence at our conference in Barcelona in October last year that, Domain's a pretty good target. And, my guess is that we happen to have just guessed correctly that he may have been looking at it. And they made a takeover bid. They basically acquired 16 or 17% on market, which you can do. Under takeover law in Australia, you can acquire up to 19.9% on market. Once you're over 5%, you've got to declare who you are, okay, because you become a material shareholder. And then, you can buy up to 19.9%. And then if you want to then grow beyond that, you either have to be patient and you can acquire 3% every 6 months, or you make a takeover bid. Clearly what's happened here is CoStar's decided to make a takeover bid. if you're a current shareholder, and I think their first bid was at the $4.30 odd range or something, 4.25, 4.30. That's a material premium on what there was. Nine, of course, being this is probably their biggest asset, has said, "Hey, I own 50% here, so without me going yes, it all falls over." Okay, so clearly, and it was in the paper. Actually, funnily enough, if you looked at the Financial Review in Australia, there was an article that talked about CoStar, Andy Florence and CoStar arriving in Australia, I think on the weekend, clearly to have, they speculate conversations with what's happening. And it probably doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that they're probably sitting there talking to Nine to try to get an agreement. Okay, so at what price would you sell? Okay, because what happens is if then you have to think, well, what happens if CoStar doesn't reach agreement and then goes away? Well, then the share price will go back down, right? So at the moment it's trading up at about $4.40 or something. I haven't checked it today, but yesterday it was, which is material, as you said, a material premium to what it was trading at. And Nine just wants to maximize its outcome from a potential exit. So of course it's going to negotiate.
Yeah, zooming out here. So I was, as you're talking there, I was kind of trying to think about, well, is this symptomatic of something a bit bigger? I mean, that's kind of our job as journalists is this a trend? And I was thinking, well, how many what we would call legacy media companies still own real estate portals? And actually the number's going down. So if you saw me doing some bad broadcasting there and actually Googling while I was trying to broadcast, it was to find out an article that I wrote in 2023 on who owns real estate marketplaces around the world. Now, back in 2023, 10.6% of all the real estate marketplaces around the world were owned by publishers or media companies. Now, I am certain that over time that came down from 30-40%, and I'm sure it will go even lower. It now seems to me that if you want to operate one of these businesses, one of these larger businesses in a market like Australia, you have to either be private equity or a specialist, like a public company like a Rightmove or something, right?
Yeah, I agree. And what we've seen is CoStar is being smart in its acquisition of these businesses it bought on the market. It's clearly has ownership of Homes.com in the US, and I think the way Andy Florence described it is he doesn't want to be part of um, the PE merry-go-round where they just basically buy it, put the price up, sell it to the next PE firm, and so on, and that he's a value buyer, and he would rather buy an asset that is maybe underpriced, which Domain, I would argue, is clearly underpriced, and then reinvigorate it, invest into it, reinvigorate management, leadership, and then start to grow it again. And I think when I look at potential assets around the world, I would have had Domain at the top of my list as
Yeah.
business to acquire. Because remember, it's a vendor paid advertising market. In the vendor is used to wanting to pay their own money, to market the house. And now all you have to do is say, well, I'm from Domain. I've got a brand that's been around for 40, 50 years. It's a long time, Domain. It was the print before it was online. Okay, as the brand. So people know it, and the markets they're very strong in are what we call the leafy green suburbs, the ones with high value houses. Okay. So when you're attuned to spending around 1% of the value of your house on marketing it as part of it, if you're sitting on a $2 or $3 million house, then you've got quite a fair chunk of change that you can go and spend, okay, on marketing. Okay, and that's what we see here. So I think if CoStar can acquire the asset, it will release a lot of value that I think has been unfortunately lost over time, just through one would argue probably not as good execution as it could have been.
Yeah, fair enough. one piece of news which we will mention quickly is that Digital Classifieds Group, aka DCG, a classifieds operator in the Southeast Asia region, has entered administration. Now, this we're kind of duty bound to mention it because it is reasonably big news. We can't say too much on it. I mean, not least because it's it's an administration. No one's really talking to anyone. Everything's up in the air for now. Just to say that it's very sad for everybody involved, and we certainly hope that that situation resolves itself as well as possible. We will move on. Next on the docket is a story that Harvey covered, which I'm actually not that sure about, but it is relevant for one particular word in the headline. Russian developer Samolet launches an MLS ahead of an IPO. Now, MLS is, the three letters that are quite relevant at the moment, which we can probably segue into. Harvey, why don't you tell us about this story?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this to come out in the headlines. It was quite an interesting one, so I thought it was something worth discussing, particularly to pick Simon's brains on it. So, US very well known for its MLS system. It's sort of like a behind the scenes library of all property listings, right? A fairly unique proposition around the world, but it seems like Russia is going to have one very soon. So Samolet is a developer, um, and Samolet Plus is its apartments service, and therefore they're quite closely integrated between you've got a developer that sort of owns this kind of semi-portal thing, and now they're launching an MLS, which they say is actually going to compete with the likes of Cian and Avito. Cian is a massive real estate vertical in Russia, and Avito is a horizontal, I believe. No disagreements from the chaps there. Okay, all right so far. And the new MLS is going to have 420,000 listings for sale and rent in Russia. And it says that it has no fakes and duplicates. It's got 95% relevance of published ads. And interestingly, 40% of the properties in it are posted with the possibility of splitting a commission between a buyer and a seller agent. So we're looking a little bit at like what's about to be outlawed in the US is about to become active in Russia, basically. Meanwhile, just to wrap up, Samolet says that it actually wants to IPO either at the end of this year or towards the start of next year. The CEO has come out. We are moving towards an IPO. They raised a massive round of money, $9.3 million. That's 825 million rubles last year as a pre-IPO funding round. So this is a pretty big scale strategy that's going on in Russia. And I think it's going to make for an interesting dynamic over there. There are 1,000 questions to answer in there, Simon. So I guess I'm just going to hand over to you and let you actually explain what the hell's going on, if indeed
Yeah,
you can.
yeah. Well, I'll give you the best shot I can. A couple of things. One is it's sort of like a bit of an MLS, but it's not really an MLS. It's at 40% of the listings. They're happy to do a commission split. Okay. Now, the reason the MLS exists in the US is because the market is fundamentally a buyer's agent and seller's agent market. It's 5-6% commission, and everyone is attuned to sharing the commission. And there's no pay to advertise on portals, etc. It's just purely about branding, upselling, positioning of yourself in that market. Now, traditionally, the Russian market is a more like the other markets in the world where you pay to list on these portals. There's not an MLS environment or structure. So if you're going to share commission, you've got to have enough commission to share, right? It's not like the commission. If the historic commission was 3%, it's not suddenly 6%, because who wants to sell the house for 6% commission when historically you've been selling it for 3%? Okay, that doesn't make sense. So you're probably splitting the 3%. And what they've probably got is for those 40% of those listings, the agents maybe they're hard to move listings. I don't know, right? It just doesn't sound like they're going to, they're trying to do something a little bit different. Okay, so the first thing is, okay, so those listings are there. You're going to split the commission. Someone has to pay to market the listings there. So I guess it's the person selling the house. Okay, that makes sense. But the other 60%, it's going to be just like Avito and Cian and whoever else is in the market. Okay, so that's fine. But they've raised 9 million. Now, when Xi'an was listed on the New York Stock Exchange, it was valued at $1 billion. Right, so we're talking fundamentally different games at this point in time. There's a long way to go from raising 9 million, and that doesn't give you a lot of ammunition. And the big question in all markets, and it can be the Russian market, the US market, the English market, is if you're a new entrant, you need to have very deep marketing pockets. Okay? Very deep marketing pockets. And 9 million doesn't sound like it's going to go too far in building a brand in those markets, because you're up against people who have got are super well established, have been around a very long time. Xi'an's been around what 20 odd years, I guess. Avito's been around a very long time. They're well entrenched. So you've got to dislodge them. If you're in England and you try to dislodge Rightmove, you've got to spend a lot of money. If you're in the United States and you've got to dislodge Zillow, you've got to be like CoStar, spending close to $1 billion to create awareness, material awareness, and so on. So I got a feeling that it's an interesting idea, but I personally would be thinking 2 or 3 times before I invested in that. Is the way I
I've
think about
got one comment to make about this news story, and that is to whoever wrote the press release. Well done for choosing the word MLS to describe this. MLS seems to be one of those words in our industry that's quite emotive.
Yeah.
It has certain connotations. It's like iBuyer. I was actually talking to somebody who runs an iBuyer before this call. He said, no, we're not an iBuyer. We're a market maker. So it's one of these words that has strong connotations that I think, they did the job of getting this news story published in publications like ours. Well done. We'll move on. The last kind of interesting story on the docket today. Apparently, the Spanish government is set to intervene in property portal algorithms. Apparently, property portal algorithms are problematic. Harvey, what are they talking about?
Yeah, so this was an interesting one. So allow me to just read off the screen here, ladies and gentlemen, to save fluffing about. So Tesh City, a lawmaker representing Madrid for the left-wing Suma Alliance, has submitted a proposal to the Ministry of Housing and the Ministry of Economy calling for stricter oversight of the data and algorithms used by portals such as Adevinta-owned Fotocasa and market leader Idealista. She was in a press conference and she basically said, these algorithms are problematic. It is potentially even anti-competitive. It's harming people finding the right homes. It might lead to price inflation, all kinds of basically angry comments about whether portals should be allowed to sort their listings based on who's paying the most, basically. So I'm not sure what on earth is going to happen here. Probably nothing. I don't see how they can really tell Idealista to stop sorting search results according to what the company has learned is best for the people that are searching for that property. But nevertheless, it is interesting to see that there are maybe what you call outside stakeholders taking a look at the way that search results are being shown to people. And as you say, maybe potentially even intervening. Simon, you look like you have, as always, an opinion to share on this one.
rubbish. All right.
Go
I'm
on then.
sorry, but it sounds to me like a politician who's trying to get a bit into the news cycle with some angle that just fundamentally makes no sense. I can't see how the sort order on a property portal leads to price inflation of the properties, if that's what's being implied here. That makes no sense. The sort order could lead to it's more expensive to advertise if you want to be at the top. Yeah, but that's free markets at work. Okay. If you want to be on the front page of a newspaper, you pay more than being in the middle of the newspaper. You want to be at on the most popular TV show in the evening, you will pay more than being in at the 2 a.m. slot. Okay? That's just the free market economics. And then, of course, does it lead to a problem for people searching? No, because as we know, anyone who is searching to really buy a home doesn't go to the first home they see and go, "I'll buy that." They spend weeks, if not months, scrolling through every single listing, trying to get a feeling for what's happening in the market, trying to understand their budget, talking to their bank about how much they can borrow. No, it's just, yeah, it does fill up 5 minutes of this podcast.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning here. I think this isn't the first time that politicians have picked on real estate portals. There has been some, I want to say about 2020, there was quite a lot of back and forth. I think Idealista actually got fined in the end for, do you know what, I'm not going to go on record and say what it was, I don't remember. But this isn't the first time that they've picked on Idealista, and Idealista are quite good in terms of their PR of putting out a lot of press releases and kind of what's the word? Assuaging? That's not the word. Making this go away and turning public opinion to their side, let's say.
But I actually think that property portals do a lot of good. It provides super transparency into a market for any consumer. It provides convenience for them. So from whether they're traveling home in the evening on the metro or whatever it is, they can actually start to search. It provides good quality data to governments, so they can then feed into their policies. What's the asking price index? How's that moving? How could that impact our policies about supply, demand, and so on? So I think it's I would be flipping the page and wondering what's next on the docket.
Well, as you can probably tell, that is the last thing on the docket. The last thing to do on the podcast. Actually, I'll hand it over to Harvey. We've got things to plug. Why don't you plug some things?
Why don't I plug some things? Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Edmund, for the opportunity to plug.
Well, you wrote them on the bullet points. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing we got to say is that we've had a couple of really good podcasts recently. The first is with Tony Blamey, who is now at Photocasa, who we mentioned earlier in the show. And secondly, we also had a great interview with Richard Hayes from Zoopla. That's been published in the last few days or so. Absolutely worth a listen. We've also got a fun one with Courtney Bujaya, our pitch club winner from Bangkok. That one's going to be coming out in the next week or so. She got to pick Simon's brains for a couple of guidance points for her business, and it sparked a very interesting conversation about expansions. How do you market? How do you go scrappy as a startup? Really worth listening to. I know we have some other conversations coming in the pipeline as well, as Ed has already alluded to. That's the only plug I wanted to do, but I guess it also makes sense for us, before we get out of here, for Simon to mention an event that's coming up in October. I think we are going back to Madrid.
Yes, the next conference is coming up, which is going to be the Property Portal Watch and PropTech Conference in Madrid from the 15th to the 17th of October. We already have strong registrations, and we're literally 6 months away from it. So my suggestion is, while the prices are super cheap, and we're putting the prices up in the next week or so, you should register. Go to PPW Europe. That's ppweurope25.com. Register, and you're going to get the best price out there. Last year we had 350. I'm aiming for between 400, 450, and if things go well, we might hit the 500 mark. So, honestly, if you want to find out what's happening in the industry, especially how AI is impacting it, then you should just come spend a couple of days in Madrid and really get fantastic insights into what is happening. And I'm sure we'll have some great speakers. The last couple of years, we've had Andy Florence from CoStar on stage. We've had CEOs of companies like Aviv on stage. It is just worth coming. You're going to learn a lot in a very short period of time, and it can truly have an impact on your business.
Yeah, I know we say this every year, but we are very excited, especially this year for the Madrid conference. Okay, gentlemen, that's everything. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.
Thank you.